The Klaxon was a physical thing, not just sound, a shrieking, synthetic bird of prey, but a force that punched through the recycled air and vibrated deep in the marrow of Kael's bones. It was the color of panic, a pulsating blood-red light that washed over the cramped bridge of the Charon, painting Sloane's face in stark, demonic relief. The low, gut-churning thrum that followed was worse. It was the sound of a predator settling in the water, the patient hum of a leviathan's engines that spoke of overwhelming power and infinite patience. It was the sound of the Hegemony. Kael's world narrowed to the forward view screen. There, against the indifferent tapestry of stars, hung the Vigilance. It was a brutalist wedge of gunmetal gray, an architect's nightmare given form and function. Its lines weren't meant to be elegant. They were meant to intimidate, to crush dissent through sheer, ugly geometry. Weapons ports peppered its hull like smallpox scars, each one a promise of swift, impersonal annihilation. The ship wasn't moving. It didn't have to. It simply was a period at the end of their sentence. His own reflection swam ghost-like on the screen, a pale mask of a man superimposed over the instrument of his own execution. The pressure was back, not the familiar, comforting crush of 1,000 atmospheres of Pacific water, but the thin, suffocating pressure of a sealed tomb. Every choice he had made since stepping onto the Endeavor had led him here, to this precise, hopeless coordinate in the void. It was the culmination of a long, slow fall, a descent that began not on a lunar outpost, but years ago in a debriefing room where they stripped the rank from his shoulders and the certainty from his soul. That failure had a taste acrid, like burnt ozone and cold metal. He could taste it now. Prox alerts are screaming. Sloane's voice was tight, a compressed wire of tension. She wasn't looking at the Vigilance, but at her console, her fingers flying across the holographic interface, as if the right sequence of commands could somehow rewrite their reality. Weapons, locks. Multiple. They're painting us with everything from point defense cannons to the main spinal lance. They're not firing. Kael said. The words felt heavy, clumsy things in his mouth. He forced them out, a bulwark against the tide of dread rising in his throat. They're enjoying the moment, she shot back, her gaze finally snapping up to meet his. In the crimson wash of the alert, her eyes were dark pits of fury and fear. They have us, dead in the water. They can take their time. He could feel the freighter groaning around them, the weary sigh of stressed metal. The Charon was a rust bucket, a hauler designed for shipping ore, not for outrunning a state-of-the-art patrol destroyer. Its shields were a joke. Its hull was a patchwork of repairs, and its drive coughed and sputtered like a dying man. They were a tin confacing a can opener. A choked sound came from the corner of the bridge. Jax was curled in on himself, his hands pressed to his temples, his knuckles white. His thin frame trembled, a human seismograph registering a cataclysm only he could feel. So loud, he whispered, his voice a ragged thread. They're all thinking. at us. Sharp thoughts. Like needles, Kael tore his eyes from the view screen and looked at the boy. Not a soldier, not a psychic weapon, just a terrified kid trapped in a nightmare. The Hegemony had done this to him, sharpened his mind into a blade and pointed it at their enemies, never caring that the blade could feel. And now, the source of all that pain was less than 1,000 kilometers away. A concentrated mass of hostile intent that was probably frying Jax's synapses. "Jax, breathe," Sloane said, her voice softening, the medic's instinct overriding the soldier's. "Focus on my voice. Block it out. You know the techniques." "It is the commander," Jax gasped, his eyes squeezed shut. "He is enjoying this. He tastes like cold glass. He knows. He knows what we have. The cinder logs, the truth, the poison pill they'd been carrying across the system. A new voice, thin and reedy with panic, cut through the tension. "They're hailing us." Dr. Aris Thorne stood by the comms panel, his face the color of bleached bone. The scientist, their supposed key to unlocking the future, looked like a rat who had just realized the maze had no exit. His intellectual arrogance, the very quality that had allowed them to decrypt so much of the logs, had evaporated, leaving behind a residue of pure, naked terror. "On screen," Kael commanded. His voice was steady. It was an old trick, a mask he'd learned to wear long ago. When the pressure built, you built a stronger container. You became the unbreachable hull. Inside, the delicate machinery of your soul could scream and shatter. But the exterior had to hold. Thorne fumbled with the controls. The view of the vigilance dissolved into a brief storm of static before resolving into the face of a man. He was sharp and severe, his face a collection of harsh angles and cold calculations. His dark hair was threaded with gray at the temples, cut with military precision. The black collar of his Hegemony officer's uniform was so crisp it looked like it could draw blood. A nameplate on his chest read, "Valerius." His expression was one of profound, predatory calm. "This is Commander Valerius of the Hegemony Patrol Destroyer Vigilance." The voice was as sterile as the bridge behind him. A synthesized baritone that was scrubbed of all human warmth. "To the unauthorized vessel designated Charon, you are in violation of Hegemony navigation statutes, harboring fugitives of the state, and are in possession of classified military intelligence. Your flight is over." Kael felt Sloane stiffen beside him. Thorne looked like he might actually collapse. The silence on the bridge was absolute, broken only by the hum of the life support and the frantic, silent beating of Kael's own heart. Every instinct screamed at him. Run, fight, die, the trifecta of a cornered animal. He gripped the back of his command chair, the worn synth leather cool and smooth beneath his sweating palm. He could feel the faint vibration of the enemy ship, a constant reminder of its proximity, its power. It was an intimacy he didn't want, the closeness of the blade before it falls. You have 60 seconds to power down your drive and prepare to be boarded, Valerius continued, his eyes seeming to look right through the screen, right into Kael. He knew Jax was right. This wasn't a standard patrol that got lucky. This was a scalpel sent to excise a tumor. Compliance will be noted. Resistance will result in your immediate and total disintegration. The choice is yours. The screen went blank, returning to the terrifying, silent image of the Vigilance. 60 seconds, a lifetime, and no time at all. He is lying, Sloane said, the words a low hiss. Compliance will be noted, and then they put a bolt in our heads. We know what they do with loose ends. We can't fight them, Thorne stammered, wringing his hands. It is impossible. We must surrender. Perhaps we can bargain. The data bargain with what? Kael cut him off, his voice sharper than he intended. The truth. They already know we have it, Thorne. That's why they're here. Giving it to them is just signing our own death warrant and ensuring no one ever knows. He paced the short length of the bridge, the deck plates cold beneath his boots. The red light of the Klaxon pulsed, a hellish, rhythmic heartbeat. 45 seconds. His mind was a maelstrom. Every tactical simulation he'd ever run, every battle scenario he'd studied, they all flooded his thoughts. And they all ended the same way, with the Charon becoming a brief, incandescent flower of plasma and vaporized metal. There was no escape. There was no victory. Some wars are fought to be lost. The subtitle from Cinder's logs echoed in his skull. A bitter prophecy. Was this it? Was this the losing battle? He looked at his crew. Thorne, a broken man already mourning a life of academic prestige he'd never see again. Jax, still trembling, a sensitive soul caught in the crossfire of a war that weaponized minds. And Sloane, her jaw was set, her eyes burning with a defiant fire that shamed his own weary pragmatism. She wouldn't surrender. She would die first, spitting in their faces. In that moment, he saw the ghost of Cinder Sloane, the hardened warrior from the logs, looking out through her eyes. 30 seconds. The weight of it all pressed down. The lie he'd been living under. The lie the entire hegemony was built on. This wasn't about protecting humanity from the Xenos. It was about control. The lullaby signal, the orchestrated attacks, the contribution cycle. It was all a machine, a monstrous engine for manufacturing consent through fear. And they, on this pathetic little freighter, were the grain of sand that could grind it to a halt, if they could just get the truth out. Sloane, he said, his voice dropping low. The main comms array. Can you bypass the safeties and route all power to it? I want the broadest possible bandwidth, everything from standard fleet channels to open civilian comms. Sloane's head snapped toward him, her eyes widening in comprehension. The fury in them was replaced by a dawning, terrible understanding. Kael, you can't. They'll fire the second we start a broadcast. We won't even get the first sentence out. We won't need to, he said, moving to the central console, his hands flying over the controls, bringing up the Cinder logs. The files were a chaotic mess of fragmented data. But one file was whole. One was complete, pristine. The first one they had found. The personal log of Cinder Kael, his own future self, his voice thick with regret and resolve, detailing the initial discovery of the Hegemony's betrayal. Aboard the Endeavor, it was raw, undeniable proof. We can't transmit the whole thing in time, Thorne whimpered. The data packet is too large, the encryption. We're not sending a data packet, Kael said. Isolating the audio track, we're just going to play it. On every channel. On repeat. 15 seconds. The air on the bridge grew thick, heavy, with the gravity of his words. This wasn't a plan for survival. This was a final, defiant act. A message in a bottle thrown into the ocean moments before the ship went down. It might not work. The Hegemony might jam it instantly. It might reach no one, but it was better than silence. It was the only weapon they had left. Sloane stared at him for a long, unblinking moment. The red lights danced in her eyes. He saw the calculation, the weighing of a near-certain death against a completely certain one. He saw the medic who couldn't save everyone, but had to try. He saw the soldier who knew a lost cause when she saw one, and knew it was still worth fighting for. She gave a single, sharp nod. Routing power now. It is going to drain the inertial dampeners and non-essential life support. It'll be a rough ride. There is no ride, Kael said softly. Only an ending. 10 seconds. He queued up the log. His own voice, older, ravaged by a future he was desperately trying to prevent, was ready to speak. The ghost in the machine was about to be given a voice. They're hailing us again, Thorne whispered, his voice trembling. Ignore it, Kael said. He looked at Jax, who had finally gone still. The boy's eyes were open, unfocused, staring at something beyond the bulkhead. The hole, Jax murmured, a strange calm settling over him. The hole in the sky. It is not just for ships. 5 seconds. Kael's finger hovered over the activation key. He looked out the view screen at the Vigilance, a monument to a lie. He thought of the billions of people living in the arcologies, feeding the machine, believing in the dream of Mars. All of it built on a foundation of manufactured terror. Some wars are fought to be lost. But maybe, just maybe, losing could be its own kind of victory. 4. Sloane met his gaze across the console, her expression grim but resolute. A soldier's solidarity. 3. He filled his lungs with the thin, recycled air. It smelled of ozone, sweat, and fear. 2. The thrum of the Vigilance's engines seemed to grow louder, a hungry, impatient growl. On. He pressed the key. For a heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then, the lights on the bridge flickered violently, as power was shunted to the comms array. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the deck, the sound of the Charon screaming its last words into the void. On his console, a simple waveform indicator bloomed, confirming the broadcast was live. A defiant spike of energy piercing the silence of space. Simultaneously, the comms unit chirped, Valerius's voice cutting through without the aid of the main screen. A foolish gesture. You've made your choice. On the view screen, a port on the Vigilance's dorsal spine glowed with a terrifying, brilliant blue light. The spinal lance was charging. The can opener was being applied. Through the ship's internal speakers, another voice crackled to life, overriding everything. It was his own, yet not his own. It was weary, broken, and filled with the terrible clarity of a man who had seen the end. My name is Kael Voss. The voice of Cinder, Kael echoed through the bridge, broadcast across 1,000,000 kilometers of empty space. I am, or was, a commander in the Hegemony fleet. I am sending this message from the future. And I am here to tell you, we have been lied to. The war is a lie. The blue light on the Vigilance intensified, washing out the stars. Kael didn't look away. He watched his death approach and listened to the sound of the truth. Finally, being told.